police report confirmed CEO James and Tu Diep are safe, but a secret betrayal lies within. The tension in the city had finally begun to ease. Sirens faded into silence, and the police report was clear. CEO James and Tu Diep were safe. The danger had passed, or so it seemed. But beneath the surface of safety and relief, something far more painful was unfolding. Something more dangerous than a criminal, jealousy wearing a smile. The new secretary, Liana, was sharp, loyal, and efficient, or so James thought. But no one knew that for years. She had loved James in silence, watching from afar as he rose to power. And when Tu Diep entered his life, bringing a warmth that Liana could never replace, something inside her broke. It wasn't a grand plan at first, just small things. James is busy, Tu Diep. He's in a meeting, maybe tomorrow. He didn't want to be disturbed. Liana made sure James and Tu Diep were slowly pulled apart, not by force, but by timing, miscommunication, and subtle lies. She deleted messages. She hid letters. She kept them at a distance until their hearts began to ache in doubt. And James, he started to wonder, why hasn't Tu Diep called? Why didn't she show up at the hospital? Is she still with Tung? Tu Diep, too, was drowning in confusion. She waited, cried, questioned her worth. She never knew that every attempt she made to reach James was quietly erased by the one who stood closest to him, his trusted secretary. But secrets don't stay buried forever. One day, while James was reviewing the police report files on his assistant's laptop, he stumbled upon unsent drafts, hidden voice messages, and messages from Tu Diep that had never reached him. His heart dropped. The betrayal wasn't outside the company. It had been next to him the whole time. He stood frozen. The pain of deception was deeper than any business loss he had endured. "How could you?" he whispered when Liana entered the room, eyes already filled with unspoken guilt. "Because I loved you," she said, "and she took you away." Not all wounds bleed. Some are felt in silence, in stolen moments, and in love that turns into poison. Even the kindest hearts can be torn apart when lies wear the face of loyalty. But the truth, no matter how long it's hidden, always finds a way back. Chapter: The truth unfolds. Can love heal the wounds? James couldn't breathe as he drove through the rainy streets, Liana's confession echoing in his ears. "Because I loved you, and she took you away." The betrayal cut deep, but what haunted him more was the image of Tu Diep waiting, confused, heartbroken, thinking he had abandoned her. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "She must hate me now," he muttered. He didn't know if she would even open the door. But when he arrived at her small home tucked behind a quiet marketplace, the lights were on. Through the window, he saw her sitting alone, hugging her knees, eyes red from crying. He stepped out of the car into the pouring rain, walked to her gate, and called her name softly. "Tu Diep, it's me. Please open the door." There was a long silence. Then the door creaked open. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in pain. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't your secretary tell you I was nothing but a distraction?" James's heart shattered. "No," he said, stepping forward. "She told me lies. I didn't know. She kept us apart. She hid your messages, your visits, everything." Tu Diep stared at him, disbelief and sorrow twisting across her face. "So, it wasn't you ignoring me? It wasn't you choosing someone else?" James stepped closer, eyes full of regret. "Never. I've only ever chosen you." She turned away, tears falling again, this time not from confusion, but from overwhelming emotion. James knelt in front of her, the rain soaking through his shirt. But he didn't care. "I'm sorry for not seeing the truth sooner, for doubting your love, for leaving you alone when you needed me most." Tu Diep slowly reached out and touched his wet cheek. Her fingers trembled. "I waited for you every day," she whispered, "even when it hurt. James took her hand in his and pressed it to his chest. "Then let me make it right, not with promises, but with every day I have left." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't pull her hand back either. Chapter: Morning Light. Healing what was broken. The night passed quietly. The storm had calmed, but inside the small house, emotions still lingered like thunder clouds. T. Diep sat by the window, watching the gray morning unfold. Her fingers curled around a warm cup of tea. Behind her, James sat silently, afraid to break the fragile peace between them. He had stayed, not because she asked, but because she didn't tell him to leave. "I didn't sleep," she said softly, eyes still on the mist outside. "Neither did I," James replied. "I kept thinking, how many moments I've lost with you, all because I didn't trust my heart." She turned to look at him. His eyes, once full of strength and command, now held only one thing: sorrow and love. "Do you believe me now?" she asked. "With everything I have," he said. He stood and walked to her slowly, kneeling beside her seat. His hand reached for hers, hesitant, afraid of rejection, but she let him hold it. "Liana is gone. The police know she tampered with messages, calls." She confessed. She wasn't the mastermind behind everything, but she tried to separate us because she loved you, T. Diep whispered, eyes full of sadness, "even if it was twisted." James nodded. "But I never gave her my heart. It was already yours, even when I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." T. Diep looked down. "You hurt me, James, I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life earning your forgiveness." There was silence between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with emotion. The past couldn't be erased, but the future, that was still unwritten. Suddenly, a knock at the door. James stood alert. T. Diep looked at him in worry. It was an officer. "Mr. James," he said, "we've traced the mastermind. John is hiding in an abandoned factory at the edge of the city. He's still dangerous, and he might be targeting T. Diep again." James's expression darkened. "Then we end this. Now." He turned to T. Diep and gently cupped her face. "You stay here. Lock the doors. I'll come back. For you, I promise." But she held onto his arm. "No, I'm not hiding anymore. We face this together." James looked into her eyes and saw it, the strength, the fire, the love. And he knew he wasn't just fighting for justice, he was fighting for them. The black car sped through the outskirts of the city. Rain began to fall again, light but steady, tapping on the windshield like a warning. James was behind the wheel, his jaw clenched, eyes fixed ahead. T. Diep sat beside him, silent, her hands curled tightly in her lap. "Are you sure about this?" he asked without looking at her. "I'm not afraid anymore," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. "He tried to ruin our lives. I need to see the end of it, with you." The abandoned factory loomed ahead like a forgotten skeleton, rusted beams and broken glass standing guard over its secrets. Police cars were already stationed at a distance, officers moving quietly, preparing for the operation. James parked behind one of them. "We go in together, but stay close to me," he said. They entered through a side door, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, the air was heavy with dampness and decay. The silence was broken only by the crunch of broken glass beneath their feet. Then, a voice, "I wondered when you'd come." John stepped out from behind a pillar, his face pale, eyes sunken. He looked more like a ghost than a man. "You came, James, and you brought your precious girl." He sneered. "How touching." James moved in front of T. Diep protectively. "It's over, John. The police are surrounding this place. There's nowhere left to run." John laughed, a bitter sound echoing through the factory. "You think this is about escape? This is about justice. My family lost everything because of your father. Land, money, dignity. You built your empire on blood and lies." James stepped forward. "You're right." John blinked. "What?" "I've seen the records. The land my father took, it belonged to your family. He wronged you, and for that, I am sorry." John's face twisted in confusion and rage. "You think sorry fixes everything? I lost my mother. I lost everything. And now, you'll lose her too." He pulled a small pistol from his coat, pointing it straight at Tu Diep. James didn't think. He leapt in front of her just as the shot rang out. The bullet tore through his shoulder. Tu Diep screamed as James collapsed. Police swarmed in at that moment, disarming John and dragging him to the ground. The factory exploded into chaos, but all Tu Diep could see was James, pale, blood staining his shirt, but still breathing. "James, stay with me." He looked up at her through the pain. "I promised I'd come back to you, and I'm not letting you go," she cried, pressing her hands to his wound. "Not now, not ever." James lay in a hospital bed, his shoulder bandaged, color returning to his face. Tu Diep sat beside him, holding his hand. The sunlight spilled through the window, golden and warm. "You really took a bullet for me," she whispered. "I'd take 100 if it means I get to keep you safe." She smiled through her tears. "Let's not make a habit of it, okay?" They both laughed, soft and weary, but full of love, because the worst was over, and from this moment on, they would rebuild, not just their lives, but a future, one of truth, forgiveness, and unshakable love. In the midst of betrayal, danger, and heartbreak, the story of CEO James and Tu Diep teaches us a timeless lesson. True love is not measured by grand gestures, but by the courage to stand beside someone in their darkest hours. James, despite facing loss, bullets, and conspiracies, never gave up on protecting the one he loved. Tu Diep, though misunderstood, never walked away. Their story shows us that loyalty isn't proven when things are easy but when everything is falling apart. We also learn that forgiveness can be a strength, not a weakness. When James acknowledged the wrongs of his family, he chose truth over pride. And when Tu Diep stayed, despite the chaos, she chose love over fear. The secret plot by the envious secretary reminds us how jealousy and hidden intentions can silently destroy relationships, but only if we let them. When trust and open hearts lead the way, no secret can keep two souls apart. Most importantly, this story whispers a truth we often forget. Even if the world tries to break you, love and integrity will always help you rebuild.